Radio Krishna Centrale presents the Srimad Bhagavatam by Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, with original Sanskrit verse, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Founder-Acarya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, a Radio Krishna Centrale program by Revati Rupeswari Devi Dasi and the Yadunandana Das. Copyright BBTI, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust International, all rights reserved. For any information, please visit radiokrishna.com. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Verse 3.
Nigamakalpataror galitang parang sukamukadamaratadrava samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamadayam muhuraho rasika bhuvibhavukaha.
Translation. Know, O thoughtful man, that Srimad Bhagavatam is the mature fruit of the tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Srila Shukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this nectarian fruit is all the more relishable by liberated souls. Purport. In the two previous slokas, it has been definitely proved that Srimad Bhagavatam is the sublime literature which surpasses all other Vedic scriptures due to its transcendental qualities. It is transcendental to all mundane activities and mundane knowledge. In this shloka, it is stated that Srimad Bhagavatam is not only a superior literature, but that is the ripened fruit of all Vedic literatures. In other words, it is the cream of all Vedic knowledge. Considering all this, patient and submissive hearing is definitely essential. With great respect and attention, one should receive the message and lessons imparted by the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Vedas are compared to the desire tree because they contain all things knowable by men. They deal with mundane necessities as well as spiritual realization. The Vedas contain regulated principles of knowledge covering social, political, religious, economic, military, medicinal, chemical, physical, and metaphysical subject matter, and all that may be necessary to keep the body and soul together. Above and beyond all this are specific directions for spiritual realization. Regulated knowledge involves a gradual raising of the living entity to the spiritual platform. And the highest spiritual realization is to know that the personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all spiritual tastes or rasas. Every living entity, beginning from Brahma, the firstborn living being within the material world, down to the insignificant ant, desires to relish some sort of taste derived from sense perceptions. These sensual pleasures are technically called rasas. Such rasas are of different varieties. In the revealed scriptures, the following 12 varieties of rasas are enumerated. 1. Raudra, anger. 2. Adbhuta, wonder. 3. Shringara, conjugal love. 4. Hasya, comedy. 5. Vira, chivalry. 6. Daya, mercy. 7. Dasya, servitorship. 8. Sakya, fraternity. 9. Bhayanaka, horror. 10. Vibhatsa, shock. 11. Shanta, neutrality. 12. Vatsalya, parenthood. The sum total of all these rasas is called affection or love. Primarily, such signs of love are manifested in adoration, service, friendship, eternal affection, and conjugal love. And when these 5 are absent, love is present indirectly in anger, wonder, comedy, chivalry, fear, shock, and so on. For example, when a man is in love with a woman, the rasa is called conjugal love. But when such love affairs are disturbed, there may be wonder, anger, shock, or even horror. Sometimes love affairs between 2 persons culminate in ghastly murder scenes. Such rasas are displayed between men and between animal and animal. There are no possibility of an exchange of rasa between a man and an animal, or between a man and any other species of living beings within the material world. The rasas are exchanged between members of the same species. But as far as the spiritual souls are concerned, they are one qualitatively with the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the rasas were originally exchanged between the spiritual living being and the spiritual whole, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual exchange or rasa is fully exhibited in spiritual existence between living beings and the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is therefore described in the Shruti mantras or Vedic hymns as the fountainhead of all rasas. When one associates with the Supreme Lord and exchanges one's constitutional rasa with the Lord, then the living being is actually happy. These Shruti mantras indicate that every living being has its constitutional position, which is endowed with a particular type of rasa, which is to be exchanged with the personality of Godhead. In the liberated condition only, the primary rasa is experienced in full. In the material existence, the rasa is experienced in the perverted form, which is temporary, and thus the rasas of the material world are exhibited in material form or raudra, anger, and so on. Therefore, one who attains full knowledge of these different rasas, which are the basic principles of activities, can understand the false representations of the original rasas which are reflected in the material world. The learned scholar seeks to relish the real rasa in the spiritual form. In the beginning, he desires to become one with the Supreme. Thus, intelligent transcendentalists cannot go beyond this conception of becoming one with the spirit whole without knowing of the different rasas. In this shloka, it is definitely stated that spiritual rasa, which is relished even in the liberated stage, can be experienced in the literature of the Srimad Bhagavatam due to its being the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. By submissively hearing this transcendental literature, one can attain the full pleasure of his heart's desire. But one must be very careful to hear the message from the right source. Srimad Bhagavatam is exactly received from the right source. It is brought by Narada Muni from the spiritual world and given to the disciple Sri Vyasa. The latter, in turn, delivered the message to his son Srila Shukadeva Goswami, and Srila Shukadeva Goswami delivered the message to Maharaj Parikshit, just 7 days before the king's death. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul from his very birth. He was liberated even in the womb of his mother, and he did not undergo any sort of spiritual training after his birth. At birth, no one is qualified, neither in the mundane nor the spiritual sense. But Srila Shukadeva Goswami, due to his being a perfectly liberated soul, did not have to undergo an evolutionary process for spiritual realization. Yet, despite his being a completely liberated person situated in the transcendental position above the 3 material modes, he was attracted to this transcendental rasa of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is adored by liberated souls who sing Vedic hymns. The Supreme Lord's pastimes are more attractive to the liberated souls than to mundane people. He is of necessity not impersonal because it is only possible to carry on transcendental rasa with a person. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the transcendental pastime of the Lord are narrated, and the narration is systematically depicted by Srila Shukadeva Goswami. Thus, the subject matter is appealing to all classes of persons, including those who seek liberation and those who seek to become one with the Supreme Whole. In Sanskrit, the parrot is also known as shuka. When a ripened fruit is cut by the red beaks of such birds, its sweet flavor is enhanced. The Vedic fruit, which is mature and ripe in knowledge, is spoken through the lips of Shukadeva Goswami, who is compared to the parrot not for his ability to recite the Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from his learned father, but for his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to all classes of men. The subject matter is so presented through the lips of Shukadeva Goswami that any sincere listener that hears submissively can at once relish transcendental tastes which are distinct from the perverted tastes of the material world. The ripened fruit is not dropped all of a sudden from the highest planet of Krishna Loka. Rather, it has come down carefully through the chain of disciplic succession without change or disturbance. Foolish people who are not in the transcendental disciplic succession commit great blunders by trying to understand the highest transcendental rasa known as the rasa dance without following in the footsteps of Shukadeva Goswami, who presents this fruit very carefully by stages of transcendental realization. One should be intelligent to know the position of Srimad Bhagavatam by considering personalities like Shukadeva Goswami, who deals with the subject so carefully. This process of disciplic succession of the Bhagavat school suggests that in the future also Srimad Bhagavatam has to be understood from a person who is factually a representative of Srila Shukadeva Goswami. A professional man who makes a business out of reciting the Bhagavatam illegally is certainly not a representative of Shukadeva Goswami. Such a man's business is only to earn his livelihood. Therefore, one should refrain from hearing the lectures of such professional men. Such men usually go to the most confidential part of the literature without undergoing the gradual process of understanding this grave subject. They usually plunge into the subject matter of the rasa dance, which is misunderstood by the foolish class of men. Some of them take this to be immoral, while others try to cover it up by their own stupid interpretations. They have no desire to follow in the footsteps of Srila Shukadeva Goswami. One should conclude, therefore, that the serious student of the rasa should receive the message of Bhagavatam in the chain of the cyclic succession from Srila Shukadeva Goswami, who describes the Bhagavatam from its very beginning and not whimsically to satisfy the mundaner who has very little knowledge in the transcendental science. Srimad Bhagavatam is so carefully presented that a sincere and serious person can at once enjoy the ripened fruit of Vedic knowledge simply by drinking the nectarian juice through the mouth of Shukadeva Goswami or his bona fide representative. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 4.
Naimishi nimishakshitri rishaya shaunakadayaha satrang svargaya lokaya sahasra samamasata.
Translation. Once, in a holy place in the forest of Naimisharanya, great sages headed by the sage Shaunaka assembled to perform a great 1,000-year sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Lord and his devotees. Purport. The prelude of the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken in the previous 3 slokas. Now the main topic of this great literature is being presented. Srimad Bhagavatam, after its first recitation by Srila Shukadeva Goswami, was repeated for the second time at Naimisharanya. In the Vaiyavya Tantra, it is said that Brahma, the engineer of this particular universe, contemplated a great wheel which could enclose the universe. The hub of this great cycle was fixed at a particular place known as Naimisharanya. Similarly, there is another reference to the forest of Naimisharanya in the Varaha Purana, where it is stated that by performance of sacrifice at this place, the strength of demoniac people is curtailed. Thus, Brahmanas prefer Naimisharanya for such sacrificial performances. The devotees of Lord Vishnu offer all kinds of sacrifices for his pleasure. The devotees are always attached to the service of the Lord, whereas fallen souls are attached to the pleasures of material existence. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that anything performed in the material world for any reason other than for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu causes further bondage for the performer. It is enjoined, therefore, that all acts must be performed sacrificially for the satisfaction of Vishnu and his devotees. This will bring everyone peace and prosperity. The great sages are always anxious to do good to the people in general, and as such, the sages headed by Shaunaka and others assembled at this holy place of Naimisharanya with a program of performing a great and continuous chain of sacrificial ceremonies. Forgetful men do not know the right path for peace and prosperity. However, the sages know it well, and therefore, for the good men, they are always anxious to perform acts which may bring about peace in the world. They are sincere friends to all living entities, and at the risk of great personal inconvenience, they are always engaged in the service of the Lord for the good of all people. Lord Vishnu is just like a great tree, and all others, including the demigods, men, siddhas, charanas, vidyadharas, and other living entities, are like branches, twigs, and leaves of that tree. By pouring water on the root of the tree, all the parts of the tree are automatically nourished. Only those branches and leaves which are detached cannot be so satisfied. Detached branches and leaves dry up gradually despite all watering attempts. Similarly, human society, when it's detached from the personality of Godhead, like detached branches and leaves, is not capable of being watered, and one attempting to do so is simply wasting his energy and resources. The modern materialistic society is detached from its relation to the Supreme Lord, and all its plans which are being made by atheistic leaders are sure to be baffled in every step. Yet, they do not wake up to this. In this age, the congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord is the prescribed method for waking up. The ways and means are most scientifically presented by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and intelligent persons may take advantage of his teachings in order to bring about real peace and prosperity. Srimad Bhagavatam is also presented for this same purpose, and this will be explained more specifically later in the text. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 5.
Taikadatu munaya pratar huta hutagnayaha satkritang suta asinang prapachur idamadarat.
Translation. One day, after finishing their morning duties by burning a sacrificial fire and respectfully offering a seat to Srila Sutta Goswami, the great sages made earnest inquiries about the following matters. Purport. Morning is the best time to hold spiritual services. The great sages offered the speaker of the Bhagavatam an elevated seat of respect called the Vyasa, or the seat of Srila Vyasadeva. Sri Vyasadeva is the original spiritual preceptor for all men, and all other preceptors are considered to be his representatives. A representative is one who can exactly present the viewpoint of Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva impregnated the message of Bhagavatam unto Srila Sukadeva Goswami, and Sri Sutta Goswami heard it from him, Srila Sukadeva Goswami. All bona fide representatives of Srila Vyasadeva in the chain of disciplic succession are to be understood to be Goswamis. These Goswamis restrain all their senses, and they stick to the path made by the previous acharyas. The Goswamis do not deliver lectures on the Bhagavatam capriciously. Rather, they execute their services most carefully, following their predecessors who delivered the spiritual message unbroken to them. Those who listen to the Bhagavatam may put questions to the speaker in order to elicit the clear meaning, but this should not be done in a challenging spirit. One must submit questions with a great regard for the speaker and the subject matter. This is also the way recommended in the Bhagavad Gita. One must learn the transcendental subject by submissive oral reception from the right sources. Therefore, these sages addressed the speaker, Shuta Goswami, with great respect. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 6.
Rishaya Uchu, Dvaipayana Puranani, Sitihasani Chanagha, Akyatani Apyadhitani Dharma Shastrani Yanyuta.
Translation. The sages said, Respected Shuta Goswami, you are completely free from all vice. You are well versed in all religious scriptures, the Puranas and histories, for you have gone through them under proper guidance and have also explained them. Purport. A Goswami, or the bona fide representative of Srila Vyasadeva, must be free from all kinds of vices. The four major vices of Kali Yuga are 1. Illicit connection with women, 2. Animal slaughter, 3. Intoxication, 4. The speculative gambling of all sorts. A Goswami must be free from all these vices before he can dare sit on the Vyasa. No one should be allowed to sit on the Vyasa who is not spotless in character and who is not freed from the above-mentioned vices. He should not only be freed from all such vices, but he must also be well versed in all revealed scriptures or in the Vedas. The Puranas are also parts of the Vedas, and histories like Mahabharata or Ramayana are also parts of the Vedas. The Acharyas or the Goswamis must be well acquainted with all these literatures. To hear and explain them is more important than reading them. One can only assimilate the knowledge of the revealed scriptures by hearing and explaining. Hearing is called Shravana, and explaining is called Kirtana. The two processes of Shravana and Kirtana are of primary importance to progressive spiritual life. Only one who has properly grasped the transcendental knowledge from the right source by submissive hearing can properly explain the subject. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 7.
Yani Veda Vidang Shrestho Bhagavan Badarayana Anye Chamunaya Suta Paravara Vido Viduhu.
Translation. Being the eldest learned Vedantist, O Sutta Goswami, you are acquainted with the knowledge of Vyasadeva, who is the incarnation of Godhead, and you also know other sages who are fully versed in all kinds of physical and metaphysical knowledge. Purport. Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentation on the Brahma Sutra or the Badarayana Vedanta Sutras. It is called natural because Vyasadeva is author of both Vedanta Sutras as well as Srimad Bhagavatam, or the essence of all Vedic literatures. Besides Vyasadeva, there are other sages who are the authors of 6 different philosophical systems, namely Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Patanjali, Jaimini, and Ashtavakra. Theism is explained completely in the Vedanta Sutra, whereas in other systems of philosophical speculations, practically no mention is given to the ultimate cause of all causes. One can sit on the Vyasa only after being conversant in all systems of philosophy, so that one can present fully the theistic views of the Bhagavatam in defiance of all other systems. Srila Sutta Goswami was the proper teacher, and therefore the sages at Naimisharanya elevated him to the Vyasa son. Srila Vyasadeva is designated herein as the personality of Godhead because he is the authorized incarnation. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 8.
Vethatvang saumya tat sarvang tattvatas tadanugrahad Bruyu snigdhasya shishyasya guravo guhyamapyuta.
Translation. And because you are submissive, your spiritual masters have endowed you with all their favors. Therefore, you can tell us all you have learned from them. Purport. The secret of success in spiritual life is in satisfying the spiritual master and thereby getting his sincere blessings. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has sung in his famous 8 stanzas on the spiritual master as follows. Quote, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. Only by his satisfaction can one please the personality of Godhead, and when he is dissatisfied, there is only havoc on the path of spiritual realization. Unquote. It is essential, therefore, that a disciple be very much obedient and submissive to the bona fide spiritual master. Srila Sutta Goswami fulfilled all these qualifications as a disciple, and therefore he was endowed with all favors by his learned and self-realized spiritual masters such as Srila Vyasadeva and others. The sages of Naimisharanya were confident that Srila Sutta Goswami was bona fide. Therefore, they were anxious to hear from him. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 9.
Tatra tatra jasa yushman bhavata tad vinishchitam Pungsam ekan tata shreyas tanna sangshitum arhasi.
Translation. Please, therefore, being blessed with many years, explain to us what you ascertain to be the absolute and the ultimate good for the people in general. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, worship of the Acharya is recommended. The Acharyas and the Goswamis are always well-wishers for the general public. They are especially spiritual well-wishers. Spiritual well-being is automatically followed by material well-being. The Acharyas, therefore, give directions in spiritual well-being for the people in general. Foreseeing the incompetencies of the people in the age of Kali, or the Iron Age or Quarrel, the sages requested that Sutta Goswami give a summary of all revealed scriptures because the people of this age are condemned in every respect. The sages therefore inquired of the absolute good, which is the ultimate good for the people. The condemned state of affairs of the people of this age is described as follows. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 10.
Prayena alpayusha sabhya kalabasmin yuge janah manda sumanda mattayo manda bhagya yopadrutaha.
Translation. All learned one. In this iron age of Kali, men have but short lives. They are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Purport. The devotees of the Lord are always anxious for the spiritual improvement of the general public. When the sages of Naimisharanya analyzed the state of affairs of the people in this age of Kali, they foresaw that men would live short lives. In Kali Yuga, the duration of life is shortened not so much because of insufficient food, but because of irregular habits. By keeping regular habits and eating simple food, any man can maintain his health. Overeating, over-sense gratification, over-dependence on another's mercy, and artificial standards of living sap the very vitality of human energy. Therefore, the duration of life is shortened. The people of this age are also very lazy, not only materially, but in the matter of self-realization. The human life is especially meant for self-realization. That is to say, man should come to know what he is, what the world is, and what the supreme truth is. Human life is a means by which the living entity can end all miseries of material existence, which arise in the hard struggle for existence, and by which he can return to Godhead, his eternal home. But due to a bad system of education, men have no desire for self-realization. Even if they come to know about it, they unfortunately become victims of misguided teachers. In this age, men are not only victims of different political creeds and parties, but also of many different types of sense gratificatory diversions, namely cinemas, sports, gambling, clubs, mundane libraries, bad associations, smoking, drinking, cheating, pilfering, bickerings, and so on. Their minds are always disturbed and full of anxieties due to so many different engagements. In this age, many unscrupulous men manufacture their own religious faith, which are not based on any revealed scriptures, and very often people who are addicted to sense gratification are attracted by such institutions. Consequently, in the name of religion, so many sinful acts are being carried on, and the people in general have neither peace of mind nor health of body. The student communities, the brahmachari, are no longer being maintained, and householders do not observe the rules and regulations of the Grihastha ashram. Consequently, the so-called vanaprastha and sannyasi who come out of such Grihastha ashrams are easily deviated from the rigid path. In the Kali Yuga, the whole atmosphere is surcharged with faithlessness. Men are no longer interested in spiritual values. Material sense gratification is now the standard of civilization. For the maintenance of such material civilizations, man has formed complex nations and communities, and there is a constant string of hot and cold wars between these different groups. It has become very difficult, therefore, to raise the spiritual standard due to the present distorted values of human society. The sages of Naimisharanya are anxious to disentangle all fallen souls, and there they are seeking the remedy from Srila Sutta Goswami. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 11.
Bhurini bhuri karmani shrotavyani vibhagashaha ata sadho trayat sarang samudhritya manishayam Bruhi bhadraya bhutanang yenatma suprasidati.
Translation. There are many varieties of scriptures, and in all of them there are many prescribed duties which can be learned only after many years of study. Therefore, O sage, please select the essential teachings of all these scriptures and explain them to the good of all living beings, that by such instructions their hearts may be satisfied. Purport. Atma, or self, is distinguished from matter and material elements. It is spiritual in constitution, and thus it is never satisfied by any amount of material planning. All scriptures and spiritual instructions are meant for the satisfaction of this self or Atma. There are many varieties of approaches which are recommended for different types of living beings in different times and at different places. Consequently, the number of revealed scriptures are innumerable. There are different methods and prescribed duties recommended in these various scriptures. Taking into consideration the fallen condition of the people in general in the age of Kali, the sages of Naimisharanya suggested that Srila Sutta Goswami relate the essence of all such scriptures because in this age it is not possible for the fallen souls to understand and undergo all the lessons of all these various scriptures in a Varna and Ashram systems. The Varna and Ashram society was considered to be the best institution for lifting the human being to the spiritual platform. But due to Kali Yuga, it is not possible to execute the rules and regulations of these institutions, nor it is possible for the people in general to completely sever relations with their families as the Varnashram institution prescribes. The whole atmosphere is surcharged with opposition. And considering this, one can see that spiritual emancipation for the common man in this age is very difficult. The reason for the sage's inquiry into the matter is explained in the following verse. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 12.
Sutta janasi bhadrang te bhagavan satvatang pati devakyang vasudevasya jato yasya chikirshaya.
Translation. All blessings upon you, O Sutta Goswami. You know for what purpose the personality of Godhead appeared in the womb of Devaki as the son of Vasudeva. Purport. Bhagavan means the Almighty God, who is the controller of all opulences, power, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. He is the protector of his pure devotees. Although God is equally disposed to everyone, he is especially inclined to his devotees. Sat means the absolute truth, and persons who are servitors of the absolute truth are called sattvatas. And the personality of Godhead, who protects such pure devotees, is known as the protector of the sattvatas. Bhadram, or blessings upon you, indicates the sage's anxiety to know the absolute truth from the speaker. Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appeared to Devaki, the wife of Vasudeva. Vasudeva is the symbol of the transcendental position wherein the appearance of the Supreme Lord takes place. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 13.
Tanna shushru shamananam arhasyang ganuvaranitum Yasyavataro bhutanang kshimaya cha bhavaya cha.
Translation. Enlighten us, O Sutta, about the personality of Godhead and His incarnations. We are eager to learn those teachings imparted by previous masters, acharyas, for one is uplifted by hearing them. Purport. The conditions for hearing the transcendental message of the Absolute Truth are set forth herein. The first condition is that the audience must be very sincere and eager to hear, and the speaker must be in the line of the cyclic succession from the recognized Acharya. The transcendental message of the Absolute is not understandable by those who are materially absorbed. Under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master, one becomes gradually purified. Therefore, one must be in the chain of the cyclic succession and learn the spiritual art by submissive hearing. In the case of Sutta Goswami and the sages of Naimisharanya, all these conditions are fulfilled because Srila Sutta Goswami is in the line of Srila Vyasadeva, and the sages of Naimisharanya are all sincere souls who are anxious to learn the truth. Thus, the transcendental topics of Lord Shri Krishna's superhuman activities, His incarnations, His birth, appearance or disappearance, His forms, His names, and so on, are all easily understandable because all requirements are fulfilled. Such discourses help all men on the path of spiritual realization. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 14.
Apanna sanskriting ghorang yannama vivasho grinan tata sadyo vimucheta yad bibheti swayang bhayam.
Translation. Living beings who are entangled in the meshes of birth and death can be freed immediately by even unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna, which is feared by fear personified. Purport. Vasudeva, or Lord Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead, is the supreme controller of everything. There is no one in creation who is not afraid of the rage of the Almighty. Great asuras like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, and others who were very powerful living entities were all killed by the personality of Godhead. And the Almighty Vasudeva has empowered His name with the powers of His personal self. Everything is related to Him, and everything has its identity in Him. It is stated herein that the name of Krishna is feared even by fear personified. This indicates that the name of Krishna is no different from Krishna. Therefore, the name of Krishna is as powerful as Lord Krishna Himself. There is no difference at all. Anyone, therefore, can take advantage of the holy names of Lord Krishna even in the midst of greatest dangers. The transcendental name of Krishna, even though uttered unconsciously or by force of circumstances, can help one obtain freedom from the hurdle of birth and death. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 15.
Yatpada sangshraya sutta munaya prashamayanaha sadya panatyupasprashta svaradhunya punusevaya.
Translation. O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. Purport. Pure devotees of the Lord are more powerful than the waters of the sacred river Ganges. One can derive spiritual benefit out of prolonged use of the Ganges waters, but one can be sanctified at once by the mercy of a pure devotee of the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that any person, regardless of birth as Shudra, woman, or merchant, can take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and by so doing can return to Godhead. To take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord means to take shelter of the pure devotees. The pure devotees whose only business is serving are honored by the names Prabhupada and Vishnupad, which indicate such devotees to be representatives of the lotus feet of the Lord. Anyone, therefore, who takes shelter of the lotus feet of a pure devotee by accepting the pure devotee as his spiritual master can be at once purified. Such devotees of the Lord are honored equally with the Lord because they are engaged in the most confidential service of the Lord, for they deliver out of the material world the fallen souls whom the Lord wants to return home back to Godhead. Such pure devotees are better known as vice lords according to revealed scriptures. The sincere disciple of the pure devotee considers the spiritual master equal to the Lord, but always considers himself to be a humble servant of the Lord. This is the pure devotional path. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 16.
Kova bhagavatastasya punya shlokirya karmanaha shuddhi kamo na shrinuyad yasha kalimalapaham.
Translation. Who is there desiring deliverance from the vices of the age of Kali, who is not willing to hear the glories of the Lord? Purport. The age of Kali is the most condemned age due to its quarrelsome features. Kali Yuga is so saturated with vicious habits that there is a great fight at the slightest misunderstanding. Those who are engaged in the pure devotional service of the Lord, who are without any desire for self-aggrandizement and who are freed from the effects of fruitive actions and dry philosophical speculations, are capable of getting out of the estrangements of this complicated age. The leaders of the people are very much anxious to live in peace and friendship, but they have no information of the simple method of hearing the glories of the Lord. On the contrary, such leaders are opposed to the propagation of the glories of the Lord. In other words, the foolish leaders want to completely deny the existence of the Lord. In the name of secular state, such leaders are enacting various plans every year. But by the unsurmountable intricacies of the material nature of the Lord, all these plans for progress are being constantly frustrated. They have no eyes to see that their attempts at peace and friendship are failing. But there is the hint to get over the hurdle. If we want actual peace, we must open the road to understand the Supreme Lord Krishna and glorify Him for His virtuous activities as they are depicted in the pages of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 17.
Tasya karamani udarani parigitani suribhi bruhi nashradadhananam leelaya dadatakala.
Translation. His transcendental acts are magnificent and gracious, and great learned sages like Narada sing of them. Please, therefore, speak to us who are eager to hear about his adventures which he performs in his various incarnations. Purport. The personality of Godhead is never inactive, as some less intelligent persons suggest. His works are magnificent and magnanimous. His creations, both material and spiritual, are all wonderful and contain all variegatedness. They are described nicely by such liberated souls as Srila Narada, Vyasa, Valmiki, Devala, Asita, Madhva, Sri Chaitanya, Ramanuja, Vishnu Swami, Nimbarka, Sridhara, Vishwanatha, Baladeva, Bhaktivedanta, Siddhanta Saraswati, and many other learned and self-realized souls. These creations, both material and spiritual, are full of opulence, beauty, and knowledge, but the spiritual realm is more magnificent due to its being full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. The material creations are manifested for some time as perverted shadows of the spiritual kingdom and can be likened to cinemas. They attract people of less intelligent caliber who are attracted by false things. Such foolish men have no information of the reality, and they take it for granted that the false material manifestation is the all in all. But more intelligent men, guided by sages like Vyasa and Narada, know that the eternal kingdom of God is more delightful, larger, and eternally full of bliss and knowledge. Those who are not conversant with the activities of the Lord and His transcendental realm are sometimes favored by the Lord in His adventures as incarnations wherein He displays the eternal bliss of His association in the transcendental realm. By such activities, He attracts the conditioned souls of the material world. Some of these conditioned souls are engaged in the false enjoyment of material senses, and others in simply negating their real life in the spiritual world. These less intelligent persons are known as karmis or fruitive workers, and the others are known as jnanis or dry mental speculators. But the above these two classes of men is the transcendentalist, known as sattvata, or the devotee, who is neither busy with rampant material activity nor with material speculation. He is engaged in the positive service of the Lord, and thereby he derives the highest spiritual benefit unknown to the karmis and jnanis. As the supreme controller of both the material and spiritual worlds, the Lord has different incarnations of unlimited categories. Incarnations like Brahma, Rudra, Manu, Prithu, Vyasa, and so on are His material qualitative incarnations, but His incarnations like Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, Vamana, and so on are his transcendental incarnations. Lord Shri Krishna is the fountainhead of all incarnations, and he is therefore the cause of all causes. You have listened to the Srimad Bhagavatam by Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, with original Sanskrit verse, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Founder-Acarya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, a Radio Krishna Centrale program by Revati Rupeswari Devi Dasi and the Yadunandana Das. Copyright BBTI, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust International, all rights reserved. For any information, please visit radiokrishna.com.